Welcome to a Moment in Time podcast. I'm your host, Eric.
And I'm Freya.
Imagine finding the original signed architectural blueprints for the most infamous building in the Bible.
Right.
And imagine finding them not carefully preserved in a museum vault, but being smuggled out of a muddy trench by two fishermen.
It is a wild image.
It really is. Today, we are dragging the Tower of Babel out of the clouds of myth and bringing it down into the actual physical dirt. We've custom-tailored this deep dive just for you to answer a surprisingly grounded question. Was the Tower of Babel a real physical building?
And, if it was, did it inspire a wave of ancient copycats all over the globe?
Exactly. So to unpack a premise that massive, we have a uniquely stacked set of sources to work through with you today.
We really do. We are looking at an article from Open Culture exploring the secular archaeological link between the biblical Babel and a very real Babylonian temple.
Yeah.
We also have a deeply detailed academic paper by Olaf Pedersen analyzing a recently recovered ancient black stone stele that actually depicts this specific tower.
And then, providing the completely different lens, we have a paper from the Creation Research Society Quarterly by Anne Habermel. She presents the young Earth creationist view, arguing that worldwide pyramid complexes are the direct, literal descendants of the original Babel dispersion.
Right, a totally different framework.
Totally different. Now, before we drop our first pin on the map, a quick reminder to you listening. These sources offer vastly different timelines and worldviews. We've got standard secular history on one side and young Earth creationism on the other.
And our mission here is to serve as your impartial guides.
Always.
We're just exploring the fascinating arguments made by both sides without taking a position ourselves. Our goal is simply to lay out the data side by side so you can see how different scholars interpret, the exact same historical echoes.
So let's start with the secular archaeological consensus, which firmly roots Babel in reality. It points to a specific structure in the ancient city of Babylon, which, by the way, translates to Babel in Hebrew. We're talking about the Etemenanki. It was this massive ziggurat built to honor the Mesopotamian god Marduk. And what is truly remarkable here is that we don't just have vague ancient texts hinting at its existence.
No, we have a visual record.
No literal picture.
Which brings us to the Tower of Babylon stele. And its discovery story is essentially a modern spy thriller.
It really is.
In the early 1990s, two local fishermen from a village called Jumjuma were digging in a large open trench. This was about 20 meters north of the Isa-Jil Temple ruins in Babylon.
Just digging in the dirt.
Exactly. And they uncovered this black stone artifact. But because this was an entirely unofficial, undocumented excavation, the artifact's journey immediately went dark.
It was smuggled out of Iraq, right?
Yes. The smugglers reportedly lied at the border, claiming the stones were just cheap, modern imitations.
Unbelievable.
And from there, it surfaced on the international antiquities market, vanished into the private Schoyen collection in Norway, and was actually seized by Norwegian police in 2021. Yeah, before finally being returned to the Iraq Museum in Baghdad in 2023. It's a wild ride for a piece of rock.
But when you look at the rock itself, you understand why people went to such lengths to possess it.
Oh, definitely. It's a dark, fine-grained sedimentary rock measuring exactly 47 by 25.5 by 11 centimeters.
Kind of like the size of a thick encyclopedia volume.
Pretty much. And carved into the stone is King Nebuchadnezzar II holding a straight staff. Next to him is a front view carving of a 7-tier ziggurat. And above that...
Wait, this is the part that blew my mind when I saw the images in the source packet. Above that is an actual architectural floor plan of the top sanctuary.
Yeah, an actual floor plan. The plan of the upper sanctuary is scaled at roughly 2:1 compared to the facade drawn below it. It clearly shows a central courtyard, various entrances, and a main cella.
And we should clarify for anyone unfamiliar with ancient architecture, a cella is like the innermost sacred chamber of a temple.
Right. It's the room where the statue or presence of the deity was believed to reside. This stele isn't just a doodle, it's an engineering schematic.
It really is the Death Star blueprint of antiquity.
It is.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I have to play the skeptic for a second. Ancient art is completely full of stylized temples and, generic religious iconography. How do archaeologists definitively know this is the Etemenanki and not just a standard tribute to the gods?
Well, the creators of the stele didn't leave anything to interpretation. They included cuneiform inscriptions.
That's the wedge-shaped writing system used in ancient Mesopotamia, right?
Exactly. And there's a 3-line epigraph right beside the ziggurat that explicitly identifies it as the Etemenanki in Babylon.
Oh, wow. So they labeled it.
They labeled it. Furthermore, below the images, there is a much longer inscription in 3 columns. In it, Nebuchadnezzar II personally takes credit for building Etemenanki.
Like a signed contract.
Basically. He also takes credit for a sister ziggurat in nearby Borsippa.
Okay, so the text, the image of the king, and the architectural plan are unequivocally linked. We have the blueprint, the location, and the king taking credit.
We do.
Let's talk about the sheer mechanics of this thing, because Peterson's paper digs into the mind-boggling scale of the structure, combining the scale's proportions with actual archaeological excavations, like the German expedition from 1913.
Yeah, the scale requires a moment to process. Etemenanki had a square base measuring roughly 90 by 90 meters.
Which is massive.
Huge. In ancient measurements, that was 180 amatu. The core of the building was a 60 by 60 meter solid block of unbaked mud brick.
Right.
And then that core was wrapped in a 15-meter thick mantle of baked brick.
A 15-meter thick wall of baked brick. We really need to underline the logistics of that.
It's staggering.
Because mud brick is cheap and easy, right? You just dry mud in the sun. But to bake bricks, you need massive kilns, staggering amounts of fuel, and highly organized labor. A 15-meter thick shell of baked brick isn't just an architectural choice. It is a flex of absolute imperial power.
A display of unimaginable wealth. Based on the steel's proportions, the finished tower stood anywhere from 73 to 91.5 meters tall.
That's like a 25-story building today.
Right. And it featured 6 massive terraces that grew smaller as they ascended. And perched on the very top was the sanctuary, which Nebuchadnezzar proudly noted featured a facade made of stunning blue-glazed bricks.
Picture yourself as a traveler in the ancient world, walking toward Babylon and seeing a 90-meter-tall, bright blue beacon piercing the sky miles before you even reach the city gates.
You can easily see how a building like that would inspire awe.
Absolutely. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If it was just a local temple to Marduk, a massive vanity project for the king, how did it become the ultimate biblical symbol of human arrogance and divine punishment?
Well, the answer lies in the historical context explored in the Open Culture article. In 587 BC, the Babylonian army invaded Jerusalem.
Right, this is the Babylonian exile.
Yes. Nebuchadnezzar's forces destroyed the city, decimated the Temple of Solomon, and dragged thousands of Jewish captives back to Babylon as exiles.
So put yourself in the shoes of those displaced captives. You've been stripped of your homeland, marched across a brutal desert, and now you are forced to live in the shadow of this looming, arrogant megastructure.
A tower reaching up to the heavens, demanding the forced labor of conquered peoples from all over the known world.
It changes how you read the Genesis story entirely. Writing the history of Babel wasn't just recording a passive historical event. It was a profound act of theological resistance.
Exactly. The captive Jewish writers were looking at this towering display of imperial power and asserting that the God of Israel was still supreme.
They were framing the sheer physical hubris of Etemenanki as a rebellion against heaven, essentially saying that Marduk's greatest monument was doomed to fail.
It is a brilliant synthesis of historical reality and theological messaging. The secular consensus aligns perfectly here. Babel was a real ziggurat named Etemenanki. Its blueprints survive on the black stone steel, and its story was immortalized by exiles living in its shadow.
Which brings us to a massive pivot.
Oh, yeah.
Because if that secular consensus is so tightly woven together, how does our third source manage to disagree with virtually every aspect of it?
It's a complete paradigm shift.
It really is. Ann Habermel's paper in the Creation Research Society Quarterly completely upends the map and the calendar, proposing that the Tower of Babel was absolutely not in Babylon.
Right. Habermel shifts the geographic parameters entirely. She argues that Babel was actually built in North Mesopotamia, specifically in the Chabur Triangle near a site called Tel Brak.
But why move it north when Babylon is right there in the south?
Because of the young Earth timeline and its model of flood geology, in her framework, a literal global flood radically reshaped the Earth's surface.
Okay.
So following that flood, she argues that southern Mesopotamia, where Babylon sits, would have still been completely underwater or just an uninhabitable marshland at the time the original tower was being constructed.
The timeline is where we really need to slow down and look at the mechanics, because the discrepancies here between the sources are just staggering.
They are. Habermel calculates her dates by heavily relying on biblical genealogies. Specifically, she looks at the birth of a figure named Peleg.
Right, because the book of Genesis states that in his days the earth was divided, which creationists interpret as the dispersion at Babel.
Exactly. But even within biblical scholarship, getting a firm date for Peleg isn't straightforward, is it?
No, the paper discusses different versions of ancient texts.
Correct. The Masoretic text, which is the authoritative Hebrew text of the Jewish Bible, places the dispersion at Babel around 2250 BC.
Oh.
However, the Septuagint, which is the ancient Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, calculates the genealogy slightly differently, pushing the dispersion back to 2570 BC.
Meanwhile, the standard secular timeline puts the emergence of early humans over 1.76 million years ago, with the agricultural revolution happening tens of thousands of years ago. I have to admit, as someone trying to synthesize this, my brain hurts.
It's a lot to reconcile.
This is like trying to sync up 3 different calendars, where the years are completely different lengths. If the timelines are this wildly different, how can archaeologists and biblical scholars even talk to each other?
It basically comes down to anchoring points. Habermel's paper notes that the secular historical timeline and the biblical timeline finally merge and agree around the year 600 BC.
Wait, why 600 BC? What forces them to agree there?
Because by that era, we have overlapping verifiable data, we have detailed astronomical records,
Like what?
like eclipses recorded by multiple civilizations, and we can run the math backwards to verify exactly when they happened. We also have extensive cross-referenced king lists from different empires that trade and war with each other. The data essentially locks the timeline into place.
Ah, I see. But for any building, artifact, or event that happens before 600 BC, you lose those anchors. The accordion expands.
That's a great way to put it.
So if you look at a structure built before that anchor point, you are going to get 2 completely different dates depending on which worldview's timeline you use. A secular archaeologist will use radiometric dating to say a site is 20,000 years old, while a young Earth creationist will compress all of that ancient history into a much tighter window post-flood.
Exactly. And grasping that compressed timeline is vital for understanding Habermel's next major argument.
Right.
Because regardless of exactly when Babel was built or whether it was in the north or the south, she argues that God's dispersion of the people resulted in an immediate global architectural phenomenon. When humanity scattered, they took the blueprint of Babel with them.
It's such a fascinating concept. The idea is that humanity essentially operated like open source software. They took the base code, the concept of a stepped tower reaching to the heavens, and adapted it to their local environments all over the world.
Everywhere they went.
But to explore that, we need to clarify our terms real quick. The sources jump between pyramids and ziggurats. Are these structurally the same thing?
They are distinct but deeply related. A ziggurat is specifically a stepped pyramid. It has distinct terraces or stories that get successively smaller toward the top, usually featuring external staircases leading to a shrine at the summit.
Right.
A true pyramid, like the Great Pyramid of Giza, has smooth, angled sides that culminate in a single point.
But the paper points out that even the Egyptians built stepped pyramids first.
Precisely. Before they perfected the smooth-sided pyramids, the Egyptians built structures like the step pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara, which looks remarkably like a ziggurat. Culturally and architecturally, they share the exact same DNA.
And when you look at the source data, that DNA is literally everywhere. I was completely stunned by the numbers here.
They're overwhelming.
There are over 1,700 known pyramids scattered across 30 different countries. We always think of Egypt and Central America, but this was a global obsession.
The reach is incredible. You have the Gunung Padang site in Java, Indonesia, which secular timelines date to over 22,000 years old.
Yeah.
You even have them in the United States. Secular scholars often refer to them as earthwork mounds, but structurally they are earthwork ziggurats. A prime example is Monk's Mound at the Cahokia site in Illinois.
I've seen pictures of that.
It's a massive terraced structure built by pre-Columbian Native Americans.
The paper includes side-by-side images that are just hard to shake. It compares the 10th century Prasat Tam temple in Cambodia with the 8th century pyramid of the Niches in Mexico. You look at these pictures and they are both multi-tiered stepped pyramids that look like they were drafted by the exact same architect.
Even though they are separated by thousands of miles of ocean.
Right. And the craziest part of this global franchise is how easily these massive structures manage to hide from us.
It does seem impossible to lose a pyramid, doesn't it? But the paper highlights how new technologies are completely rewriting our understanding of this ancient landscape, specifically LiDAR technology.
For those who might not know, LiDAR uses lasers mounted on aircraft to pulse light down through dense jungle canopies. It strips away the vegetation digitally, revealing the bare earth topology underneath.
And using that exact technology, archaeologists recently discovered over 60,000 previously unknown Mayan structures completely swallowed by the Guatemalan jumble,
60,000.
including countless pyramids.
Or they just hide in plain sight. Look at the Great Pyramid of Cholula in Mexico.
Yeah.
It is technically the largest pyramid in the world by volume, covering 39 acres.
It's massive.
When the Spanish conquerors arrived, it was so deeply overgrown with grass and trees that they thought it was just a natural hill, and they accidentally built a massive Catholic church right on top of it.
The sheer volume of these structures globally is central to Habermas's argument, but she highlights another vital mechanism from the Genesis text.
What's that?
Genesis says they were building a tower and a city.
Ah, right.
Globally, when we uncover these pyramids, they are rarely standing alone in an empty field. They are consistently the anchor points of massive religious complexes. You see it at Tenochtitlan in Mexico or Dur-Sharrukin in Assyria. The pyramids are surrounded by temples, altars, plazas, and infrastructure to support a priestly caste.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I have to jump in here and push back on the core premise. So what does this all mean? Couldn't this all just be chalked up to basic physics?
How do you mean?
Well, if you are an ancient civilization with primitive technology, and you decide you want to build a really tall building that doesn't immediately collapse under its own weight, a wide base that gets narrower at the top is quite literally the only shape that works. Is a stepped pyramid in Illinois really evidence of a shared cultural memory of Babel, or is it just gravity dictating ancient architecture?
It is the most common counterargument, absolutely. And convergent evolution in architecture is the standard secular explanation. Gravity applies everywhere, so humans everywhere solve the problem of building high the exact same way. However, the creationist view synthesizes a different conclusion. It argues that while gravity dictates the shape, it doesn't dictate the culture. Right. Meaning it is the overwhelming universal dedication to building these specific religious complexes, utilizing vast resources to construct shrines to the heavens in every isolated corner of the globe. For Habermas, that universal religious impulse is undeniable evidence of a shared ancestral memory of that original rebellion at Babel.
It is a phenomenal amount of information to digest. We've covered incredible ground today. We started by looking at a Babylonian PR disaster, recorded by captive Jews who were forced to look at a 90-meter-tall blue ziggurat every day.
Yeah.
We examined a smuggled blackstone stele that gave us the literal architectural blueprints of Etemenanki. And we explored a creationist theory that maps a global architectural franchise, tracing a straight line from a dispersed ancient city all the way to the jungles of Cambodia and the plains of Illinois.
We've examined the physical dirt, the architectural logistics of baked bricks, and the global footprint of an idea that simply refused to die, regardless of how you calibrate the timeline of human history.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a provocative thought, pulled straight from the comments section of the Open Culture article.
Oh, I like this one.
It's so good. A reader named Mark brought up a fascinating point regarding the mechanics of language. He noted that when the Roman Empire collapsed, Latin naturally evolved into Italian, Spanish, and French. It didn't require a miraculous intervention. It simply required time, geographic separation, and a breakdown of communication.
Right, a completely natural linguistic drift over generations.
Exactly. So I leave you with this question to mull over on your own. Was the famous confusion of tongues at the Tower of Babel a sudden, miraculous punishment sent down from the heavens? Or was it just the inevitable, natural drift of human language that occurs the very moment a community stops building together, drops their blueprints in the dirt, and walks their separate ways out into the world? That wraps it up for this deep dive. Thanks for watching A Moment in Time podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe.